Publius Clodius Pulcher was a Roman politician known for his popularist tactics. As tribune, he pushed through an ambitious legislative program, including a grain dole, but is chiefly remembered for his feud with Cicero and Milo, whose supporters murdered him in the street. A Roman nobilis of the patrician gens Claudia, and a senator of eccentric, mercurial and arrogant character, Claudius became a major, if disruptive, force in Roman politics during the rise of the first triumvirate of Pompey, Crassus and Caesar. He passed numerous laws in the tradition of the populares, and has been called one of the most innovative urban politicians in Western history. Beginnings and rise. Family and early career to 67 BC. Born as Publius Clodius Pulcher in 93 BC, the youngest son of Appius Claudius, he became known as Publius Claudius after his controversial adoption into the plebeian family of Fontei in 59 BC. He was sibling of 2 brothers and apparently 5 sisters. The identity of his mother's family continues to be one of the most disputed issues of 1st century BC Roman social history. Most likely she was a Servilia of the patrician Caepianes, daughter of Q. Servilius Caepio, or a Caecelia Metella, sister of Q. Metellus Pater. It is certain that he was close enough by maternal bloodline to be called frater of some notable figures of the time. Q. Metellus Sella, the husband of his elder full sister, Q. Metellus Nepos, Mucia Tertia, the wife, successively, of Pompeius Magnus and M. Aemilius Scaurus, and mother of their children, and Mucia's brothers P. Scaevola the Pontifex and Q. Scaevola the Augur, tribune of plebs in 54 BC. It appears that his father married twice and that among his numerous Claudian brothers and sisters, Claudius was a full sibling of only the 2 youngest girls, Claudia Metelli and Claudia Luculla. At various times he was accused of incestuous relations with all his sisters, both of whom were known as Claudia in consequence of his transferred plebeian status in 59 BC. Claudia Metelli is usually identified as Lesbia, to whom the poet Catullus dedicated many of his poems, but the evidence is not conclusive. There is reason to believe that Claudius married twice. Cicero refers to a certain Natter as his brother-in-law, although he does not mention his Gentile name. In a passage of uncertain genuineness, Servius calls him Pinarius Natter. The surname is known from the Pinaria gens, but otherwise not among the Fulvii, notwithstanding which many scholars have inferred the existence of a Lucius Fulvius Natter. But Drummond provides reasons to believe that Claudius was married once before Fulvia, and that his first wife was Pinaria, in which case his brother-in-law was Lucius Pinarius Natter. In 62 BC Cicero refers to Natter as a stepson of Murena. Between 68 and 67 BC, Claudius was a legatus. In 62 BC or later he married Fulvia of Tusculum, daughter of Sempronia, the formidable principal heiress of the plebeian high noble family of Semproni Tudatani, which had died out in the male line with her father. Fulvia bore him at least 1 son and 1 daughter who survived to adulthood, and following his death she married C. Scribonius Curio, tribune of plebs in 50 BC, and then Marcus Antonius the Triumvir, also producing children by both of those important politicians. Their daughter Claudia was wed to the young Caesar for political reasons in 43 BC or 42 BC, when she was barely of age, and soon divorced in 40 BC after the imperious Fulvia joined with the consul Lucius Antonius in stirring up the Perusina War in 41. His homonymous son, Publius Clodius Pulcher, turned out badly. A lethargic nonentity who only rose to the praetorship after 31 BC under the second triumvirs and died amid scandals of luxurious excess and an obsessive attachment to a common prostitute. An inscription of ownership on an expensive Egyptian alabaster vase once owned by the son has survived to attest the latter's short official career, and includes an unusual triple filiation which confirms the literary evidence to the effect that Claudius' own filiation was N. He took part in the Third Mithridatic War under his father's brother-in-law, Lucullus. However, considering himself treated with insufficient respect, he stirred up a revolt. His brother-in-law, Marcius Rex, governor of Cilicia, gave him the command of his fleet, but he was captured by pirates. On his release he repaired to Syria, where he nearly lost his life during a mutiny he was accused of instigating. A curious incident took place during his time in pirate hands which was to have later consequences. The pirates sought a good ransom price from Ptolemy of Cyprus, a nominal ally of Rome who was then involved in negotiations for a potential marriage to a daughter of Mithridates Vi of Pontus. Ptolemy sent a fairly trivial sum which so amused the pirates that they released Claudius without taking any money. He had evidently been overestimating his worth, and this transaction filled him with hatred for the Cypriot ruler. In Rome and Gaul, 66–62 BC, returning to Rome in 66 BC, Claudius was in serious need of protection from his brother-in-law because of the treason he had committed in Lucullus' army, and his incestuous relations with Lucullus' wife, which Lucullus had discovered upon his return the same year, prompting him to divorce her. Turning 27 in the year of his return, Claudius wed Fulvia, the daughter of Sempronia of the Tudatani, that year or the next. At about the same time, Lucullus, a very close relative L. Licinius Murena, became Sempronia's third husband. He also collusively prosecuted Catiline in 65 on a charge of extortion from his African command, and so helped secure his acquittal. In 64 BC, Claudius went to Gaul on Lucius Murena's command staff. He returned to Rome with his commander in 63 in time for the elections at which Murena secured his family's first consulate, mainly with the help of Lucullus' army veterans and the consul Cicero, Claudius almost certainly having assisted as well. Catiline's defeat at the same elections was the signal to begin his attempt at a violent coup d'état, with the aim of slaughtering most of the nobility, especially the plebeian nobles and senators, and setting up a small patrician-dominated oligarchy. Although Claudius was still patrician, and it later suited Cicero to portray him as a participant in the Catilinarian conspiracy, Claudius was not involved. On the contrary, he maintained his protective closeness to Murena and the cause of the Optimates, rendering Cicero every assistance. As the great drama of the detection and arrest of the conspirators unfolded, Claudius appears to have joined the many other equestrian and noble youths who clustered about the consul as an informal but potent and intimidating bodyguard. In the same year, one of Claudius's sisters attempted to persuade Cicero to divorce his wife Terentia and marry her instead. This made Terentia furious with the Claudia in question, and by association with the wider family. Bona Dea scandal and trial for incestum. The rites of Bona Dea were held in December, at the house of Rome's leading magistrate. In 62, they were held in Julius Caesar's grace and favor house in the Regia, loaned to him as Pontifex Maximus. They were hosted by his wife, Pompeia, and his mother Aurelia, and were supervised by the Vestal Virgins. This was a cult from which men were excluded, so completely that they were not permitted to know or even speak the goddess's name, hence the euphemism, good goddess. Claudius intruded on the rites, disguised as a woman and apparently intent on finding and seducing Pompeia, but he was discovered. The ensuing scandal dragged on for months, during which Pompey returned from the East. Caesar divorced his wife, and most public business was suspended. Lucullus was determined to use the opportunity to destroy Claudius' political career, and eventually brought him to trial on the capital charge of incestium. 3. Cornelii Lentuli prosecuted. Lucullus had numerous household slaves testify to Claudius' incest with his sister Clodia Terentia, who had hosted the previous year's rites. Almost certainly pressed Cicero to testify against Claudius in revenge for the latter's unsuccessful but still damaging prosecution in 73 of her half-sister, the Vestal Fabia, on a charge of incestium with Catiline. Caesar's mother Aurelia and sister Julia testified to Claudius' offense. Caesar did his best to help Claudius by claiming he knew nothing. When asked why, if he knew nothing, he had divorced his wife, Caesar made the famous response that Caesar's wife had to be beyond suspicion. Claudius perjured himself with a fabricated alibi that he was not in Rome on the day of the rites, which Cicero was in a position to refute, though he was uncertain whether he should do so. Eventually national and domestic politics forced his hand. He was most eager to forge a détente between Lucullus and Pompey, who were at loggerheads over the settlement of the eastern provinces, and wished to do Lucullus a favor in this matter. While at home, Terentia demanded that he give his testimony and ensure the destruction of her subversive rival's brother and lover. Cicero did so, but Crassus decided the outcome of the trial by bribery of the jurors en masse to secure Claudius a acquittal. When it was all over, Claudius' politics had been transformed and became more deeply personal than ever before. He clung to Crassus as his chief benefactor, and was grateful to Caesar for his attempt to help him. But he had risked interfering with Lucullus' army in the east directly in the interests of Pompey, who had not lifted a finger to help him, despite being locked in serious political dispute with the Lucullar brothers. And he had assisted Cicero against Catiline. Sex and politics in late Republican Rome. If the Republic must be destroyed by someone, Cicero fulminates against Claudius in mock resignation. Let it at least be destroyed by a real man. Claudius' transvestitism in the Bona Dea incident was to supply Cicero with invective ammunition for years. Like other popularist politicians of his time, as embodied by Caesar and Antony, Claudius was accused of exerting a sexual magnetism that was attractive to both women and men and enhanced his political charisma. The sexual power of Claudius, his suspected ability to win the wife of Caesar, might be read as indicating the potency of his political influence. Eleanor Windsor-Leach claimed, in her Lacanian analysis, gendering Claudius, that the frequency and intensity of Cicero's wordplays on the cognomen Pulcher show a certain fascination masquerading under rebuke. Leach calls Cicero's description of Claudius' attire when he intruded on the rites amounts to a verbal striptease, as the privative Latin preposition a deprives the future tribune of his garments and props one by one. Cicero's accusations of sexual profligacy against Claudius, including the attempt to seduce Caesar's wife into adultery and incestuous relations with his sisters, failed to enlarge in scope over time, as Claudius' marriage to the formidable Fulvia appears to have been an enduring model of fidelity until death cut it short. At the same time, even devotion to one's wife could be construed by the upholders of traditional values as undermining one's manhood, since it implied dependence on a woman. Adoption into plebeian family of the Fontei. On his return from Sicily, Claudius sought to hold a tribunate of plebs, with the stated intention to get revenge on his bitter enemy, Cicero. However, in order to be elected as a tribune, he had to renounce his patrician rank, since that magistracy was not permitted to patricians. In 59 BC, during Caesar's first consulship, Claudius was able to enact a transfer to plebeian status by getting himself adopted by a certain P. Fonteius that was much younger than him. The process violated almost every proper form of adoption in Rome, which was a serious business involving clan and family rituals and inheritance rights. On the 16th of November, Claudius took office as tribune of the plebs and began preparations for his destruction of Cicero and an extensive populist legislative program in order to bind as much of the community as possible to his policies as beneficiaries. Nonetheless, the legality of Claudius' transfer, and therefore all his acts and laws, remained contentious for many years. Most seriously, in order to be permitted to adopt a fellow citizen from another clan and its rights into his own, a Roman citizen was required to be at least middle-aged and able to prove that he had tried but failed to produce children. In this case, Claudius himself turned 34 in 59 BC and Fonteius, his adopter, was even younger, something entirely illegal and unprecedented. Furthermore, once an adoption was made, the adoptee took his place within the adopting family with full rights and duties as the adopter's eldest son. This included changing his name to that of the adopter, to which an additional cognomen was normally appended, in order to indicate either the clan or the family of his birth. Instead, Claudius violated this essential convention and simply gave a plebeian spelling to his clan name, from Claudius to Claudius, turning the act of adoption to an open farce. In this way, he emphasized that his sole interest in the enactment of this public socio-religious farce was to obtain a semblance of technical permission to hold the key plebeian magistracy, with its extensive legislative powers and protective sacrosanctity.